All right, hey everybody, welcome back to the Telivy MSP podcast. Very excited to have our guest here today. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is John Hansman, and I'm the CEO of Truit out of Olympia, Washington, and actually Spokane, Washington. We have two locations in the state.
Very nice. Spokane, that's is that around the Seattle area too?
No, Spokane is actually on the other side of the mountains. So if you look at the state, there's a bunch of mountains that split the state in half. And Spokane is very close to the Idaho border, within about 15 to 20 miles of the Idaho border.
Man, beautiful scenery out there. I used to live in the Bellevue, Seattle area. So yeah, beautiful mountains, Mount Rainier. I'd love to dive into that a little bit later too. But yeah, for those who don't know, hey everybody, I'm Jeremy. I'm head of partnerships at Telivy, doing everything partnerships, community building, and this podcast and panels and such. So very excited to speak to our guest today. So first off, John, could you take us through your 20 years experience through the industry? We'd love to educate the audience on, your career and all of your experience.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, my career did not start in the IT industry. It actually started in the home security industry. I started working in a 24-hour monitoring center and worked my way up into management. And through there, I was learning about business operations. I worked my way, into assistant manager. And then before my exit and starting the company, I moved into the IT department for the corporation that eventually bought our small business. But I spent 20 years leading staff and working on proprietary types of machinery. They had these things called receivers. If you walk in to a monitoring center today, it looks a little different because things are automated on servers, but we used to have these really big boxes that hung on racks, like server racks, and they had all these blinking lights, looked like Star Trek, and they would receive alarm signals and then move them into the operators' computers to be able to handle signals that come in. So you think of it, ADT, for example, is probably the biggest known alarm company out there. Yeah. So I worked in their monitoring center for about 20 years, just right at 20 years. And a good 12 years of that, I spent running management for their center.
Very cool. And I'd love to learn a little bit more about you starting your own business. How did that come about? How did you get the idea for it? What was that like starting your own business?
It's kind of a funny story. So I had a friend who was in ministry, who was pastoring, and he left and decided that he wanted to go into the private sector. And he had some of the same thoughts and feelings that I had about my business and my job that I had done for 20 years, where I said to myself, well, I don't know what I could do. I've been doing this for so long that I don't know what else I could do. And so he went and saw a career counselor. And that led him to actually, which is crazy, it led him to move from becoming a pastor to being a rocket scientist. He now works for one of the big rocket companies, building engines and stuff like that. Which is super crazy, right? Like, that's not one of the things that you think a pastor doing.
Yeah, the known career paths.
Yeah, no, right. But what it did in me is it really triggered my mind to realize that I could go, and if he could change his career from ministry to being a rocket scientist, I could figure out what I wanted to do and go do it. And so I actually started out, I had already had clients that were using me for technology, mostly residential. And so I moved into doing a lot of residential stuff. And over 3 years, I went out and promoted myself. I ended up working with small business owners who could be okay with the fact that I had a full-time job. And I slowly built my clientele over 3 years. And then I hit this point 3 years into my journey, which happened to be, which is crazy, September of 2019. So if we remember what happened just after that, But I hit this point in June, July, where I was talking with people. I had like a coach who was working with me, and we did all the math, and I realized I was making part-time what I was making full-time. So I was effectively bringing in the same amount of income in my off time that I was bringing in during my full-time job. And all of a sudden it clicked. I need to quit, because if I can do the same amount of money part-time, what can I do if I worked full-time? So it was in the process of negotiating for a pretty good size property management company to do their IT while I was working. I gave them a drop dead date that said in September, I'm going to be available full-time to be your IT person. And they signed, and that really got me started. And to this day, I can still remember it was September, what was it? It was October 1st, I think is what my start date was. And I went to my friend's marketing firm. I rented a desk from them. And I literally remember sitting there, twiddling my thumbs, looking at the phone, waiting for it to ring, not sure what to do, not sure how to market. I just was like, what am I going to do? And so I started making phone calls. I started showing up to businesses. I started going door to door, calling people, and slowly was building my clientele. And then what was really fascinating was, then COVID started becoming news in December of that year. So it was 2 months in when the first COVID talk happened, where we started seeing this thing happen in December in the US. And then, in March, everything shut down. And I was not terrified. I don't think I was ever terrified, but I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, my phone stopped ringing for like 3 days, 4 days. So it was just dead. And then all of a sudden I started getting not a lot of commercial, but I started getting a crazy amount of residential. Can you fix my computer? There's no one open. And
oh, wow.
And so I didn't have a shop. I literally was working out of my home at the time. So I literally converted my garage into a clean room repair shop, because we didn't know anything about COVID back then, right? Like, we were like all terrified. So I had gloves, and I had like a way to wipe everything down. I look back and I'm like, what was I doing? But then so we ended up growing a repair shop that we had going for. We actually just shut down the residential side in October of last year. So it went strong for 3.5 years, and it got us through the pandemic. And while I ended up hiring a technician, getting a commercial space and running repair out of there, grew it into 2 office spaces, so a pretty good space. And then while I had a tech doing all the repair stuff and making money there, I spent all my time looking for commercial clients. And then we built that enough over this last couple years, 3 years, that it made more sense to just vacate that retail space and really focus in on the MSP world and not trying to do both.
Wow.
So we went, we rebranded our company. We had this company called Oli Tech Guys, and then we moved off to Truit to really separate. That's where that came from, to really separate ourselves in the market as a premier managed IT provider. And
what does the name True IT signify?
That was kind of the idea. So the company, we call it Truit, but the idea of the true IT provider, we wanted to have, the way I did this is I literally went to my marketing firm who built my Oli Tech Guys website. I said, look, it's time to revamp. I need a name. I want to be the next Nike of IT. So find me a brand that looks like I'm doing business with, in the $1 million space, because that's where we're going to go. And they did. They came up with some things, and then they came up with Truit. And we didn't want to do, I'm not opposed to it, but I had Oli Tech Guys, and I had hands-on, technology solutions before. I had a lot of different names, and I really just wanted to have something that was really simple.
Yeah. Truit's a great name.
Truit, it doesn't have cybersecurity in the name at all. It's just quite literally just Truit, and we absolutely love the brand.
Mhm.
Naren, where did the name Telivy come from? Speaking of which.
It's actually Indian dialect, or it's a word that means having clarity,
Mm.
or smart, in a couple of Indian dialects. So that's where we kind of came with it. And the funny thing is, Vijay and I, like, we both speak like different languages, different South Indian languages, but then like Telivy has, like, roots in both those languages, and we thought
Ah.
pretty funny, and it somewhat means the same thing as well.
Yeah, I love names with deeper meanings, and it fits really well because it works with risk assessments, and we'll talk about how that pertains to Truit later. But I just wanted to say, John, I really relate to that feeling when you're first starting off your business and waiting on the phone call, and you just decide to go out and cold call and knock on doors, right? Back when you first started, all the tech guys. And I guess and that's actually how I started one of my former companies, and we're doing VR gaming. Was I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but let me just start calling people, emailing people, start talking to people, bring everybody together at an event, and that's how our business back in the day, 7 years ago, got started. I guess, Naren, did you have a story similar? What was that emotion like when you first started your business?
Yeah, I mean, it was something similar, right? Because I think all of us can agree that, or can associate ourselves with, like, being more on the tech side of the world, and having to do, like, sales, marketing, which is a completely different aspect of things. It's almost a different type of mindset too, right? There's this a good book called Sales for Founders, essentially. I'm forgetting the exact title, but it goes to talk about, like, how the principle behind, like, the principle behind, like, product, tech, engineering is itself is so different from, like, just going out there and just making stuff happen, making a lot of activity happen, sales
Yeah,
activity.
yeah. Building
So
relationships, building your brand, right? Messaging.
Yeah, and
And
all business is really about the hustle, regardless of
yep.
what
right.
you are doing, whether it's IT management, whether it's becoming a vendor for IT, or opening a new restaurant, or whatever it is. The people who hustle the most are the ones who become the most successful. When I was working that full-time job and running my business, I know I was doing 70 to 80 hours a week. I was
Wow.
working my 40 hours as a manager, and then secretly moonlighting as an IT professional. And it was really good. I learned a lot during the last couple of years of working for them, because they got purchased by a big corporation. And so I got put on some really big project management teams, and I got one of the things that kept me afloat during COVID was I got a contract that lasted right up until COVID started. I had a contract that they wanted me to finish out. So I left the company as an employee and went in, stayed as a contractor to finish out
Oh,
some
wow.
projects. But it's all about hustle. And today, I've been doing this 7 years is how long I've been focusing on my own business. And 3 of it, I've been just self-employed, and I'm still hustling just as much as I did before. It doesn't
Oh,
stop.
yeah. No, I don't think the hustle ever stops. It's chasing the market. There's new problems at every turn. But I wanted to dive deeper into Truit, your company now. So you mentioned when you transitioned from all the tech guys to Truit, you focused on enterprise. Your focus is enterprise solutions. Could you tell me a little bit about the problems that you saw in the market that made you want to go into this enterprise market? What problems are you solving? What solutions do you offer?
Yeah, I think there's 2 parts to it. One of it is, for me, retail IT is really hard. And unless you've got the personality for it, and the quantity of people coming, it's hard to make money and have a really good business. And I just didn't enjoy that as much. People are always looking for the cheapest way to do work, and when you do retail, that's they're just looking for the best deal, right? Just to get a new computer or whatever. The reason why I wanted to do managed services from the very beginning was I spent a lot of my career in the alarm industry as a partner with other alarm providers. So we were doing what they called third-party monitoring. So they would, a small business would pay our center a wholesale rate to monitor all their accounts. And then they would basically mark that up into a reoccurring bill for the client for fire alarm systems and burglar alarm systems. So I understood the recurring model. But then I had been partners with some of these alarm owners for, like 15 years. I've been talking with them, and then I became a partner with them as the manager for a good 10 years. I had built relationships with people, and I had thrived off of solving problems and making people's life easier.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really before, you think, even back then, cybersecurity was a thing, but it wasn't like it is today. So we were solving more, I just don't want to answer like my initial client who said, "Hey, I've been doing IT for my business for the last 10 years. I'm busy and I don't want to do it anymore." So I was solving the problem of giving the owner back more time. And so I went into MSP as a commodity, as, hey, I can give you back time so you don't have to, so you can focus on your business. That was the problem that I was trying to solve initially. And I think what's really fascinating is it's completely changed. Like what I do, what I see is the problem I'm trying to solve today is vastly different from what it was 3 years ago when I quit my job.
How so?
Well, I think the market has changed. The MSP market has changed dramatically in the last 3 years, 4 years, where now we're talking about how do we keep businesses safe? Because when I first entered the market, virus protection, good old virus protection was the standard. As long as you got that, you're in good shape. Most things won't get through. And we weren't necessarily thinking about email as much as we are today. And, we had Exchange servers, or we had a lot of people who were on their own hosted email, and things have dramatically changed with Google Workspace and Office 365 becoming more prevalent leaders in how people are doing work email. We're now focused on the big picture of IT, and really, our company is becoming unique in the space where I sell IT services in the sense that if somebody, all of our plans include the basic tech support, but that's not what we're talking to our clients about. We're talking to our clients about risk and helping them understand that today, if you want to keep your business safe, you have to look at the cybersecurity aspect of IT management. You can't just stick your head in the sand and hope that this will pass. And we just don't live in that world anymore. And statistically speaking, we're finding more and more small businesses being attacked by different threat actors of all different types, phishing emails and all of that. So our focus is just really helping them understand the risk and then helping them to mitigate that so that they have the things in place to make sure insurance companies will pay out. And if they have an instance, or it's that we can limit the blast radius. For us, it's really about how do I keep my fellow business owners in business? That's the thing that I wake up for in the morning, but it's the thing that keeps me up at night every once in a while.
Yeah, it's really easy to get paranoid as soon as you get into
right. Did we check that box yesterday? That, because if that box isn't checked, we could lose everything. And, sometimes it's easy to worry, but our staff works really hard to focus in on giving our clients the best security that we can give them. And then also do the other stuff that is a commodity that is valuable still. Like, it's still valuable to have a tech team to solve your employees' issues when they come up, or to solve those pesky printer issues or what have you.
Mhm.
But that's not the biggest reason that a small business should have an IT department, outsource IT.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, and I totally agree with you. IT, cybersecurity, the market has shifted a lot, especially with how advanced the exploits are. You mentioned phishing emails, and we'll go into more different types of risks in a bit as well. But I wanted to understand a little bit about your customers. What types of customers do
We
you
have,
serve?
I'm
Size,
probably the most
industries?
mishmashed, MSP, like a lot of small businesses. We took everything we could find. And so I have everything from a large company that has they own some gas stations and some restaurants and some they have a big organization, to some property managements, to some contracting, like some think tanks and some people who are just consultants. I've got some chiropractors. I literally have the whole gamut of different types of clients these days. We've been starting to focus in a little bit more towards CPAs and law firms, and starting to really look at helping them to look at their business model and try to help them get some protection. Only because it's easier to market to one group of people than cast the net to everyone. But we literally, we are so all over the map as far as the types of clients we have. Lots of construction and lots of different types of.
But your service is industry agnostic, right? As you mentioned, every business is vulnerable to these cybersecurity risks and IT, right? These days, everybody uses a computer, everybody's the internet. You mentioned Google Workspace, Office 365. This is across the board. So I'd love to learn about your process, from let's take any type of customer as an example, but how do you meet your customers, find them? How do you sell them on Truit? And then when you serve them, what happens? How do you go about solving the problems that you see, the risks that you see?
So I think there's two parts to the way I see IT management today. One thing that we do is we work with our clients to create a baseline to begin with. And so we do that through risk assessments. So we have two baselines in IT, right? We have the "you should be here," and then we have our clients here baseline. So what we do is we find out where does our client exist in the spectrum by doing a cybersecurity risk assessment, as it's just a starting point. It's a service that we offer that our future clients pay for, because just like a doctor, you can't diagnose an issue or provide them with medication until you diagnose what's going on. And so we follow that same idea, that when we look at our clients' infrastructure, we want to know where they're sitting. We want to know the types of issues that they're facing. Do they have internet security? Do they have an old Exchange server that's just sitting out there vulnerable? Do they have multiple servers that aren't patched? Do they have a plan if they if they have a cybersecurity incident? Do they have anything in place? And what we do is we look at the industry they're in, the amount of PII or personal information they're keeping in their system, and then we base a quote around that. But our goal is to help educate the client to say, okay, you're sitting here at this place, but the best standard to keep your business safe is up here. Okay. And we help them do that with the cybersecurity assessments.
And I'm curious, at that point, right, what the risks are, and you understand where they are compared to the standard. When you communicate that to them, how do clients typically respond? Because these, I imagine your clients are non-technical folk, right? They're not cybersecurity experts, right? How do you bridge that gap?
I've had an array of responses. I'd say probably 90% of the responses, for me at least, people get it and see it. Maybe I'm just really good at selling that service. But I've also had the 20% of people who laughed me out of the conference room because they just said, well, I don't need this. And interestingly enough, that same industry is now regulated for that client who basically switched providers when we talked about cybersecurity and changing things. They're now subject to FTC safeguards. So, now they have to be compliant with every single thing that we told them that they needed to do and have. So it's interesting because their bill is going to end up going up to what we were talking about anyways, because now they have to follow compliance. But, really most of the time, we have a very good way of showing people the risk of their business and show them with real data. Like I sat with a CPA yesterday who paid for he called it a WISP, basically an IT service plan. So what do just a thing, he paid like $600 for it, and it had no data in it at all. It quite literally just had a checklist. It had green and yellow and red colors of his risk level, had what he had for antivirus in there. And what it looked like to me is they just asked him a bunch of questions that he answered. And then they created him what you should do for your business. And what they provided was great structure. It was best practice, but they didn't do any real scanning of his business. There was no data. So we talked through that yesterday, and then we helped to educate him on these are the things that you want to know. Like, you should know how many passwords are sitting on your computer that somebody could run a script and just grab. You want to know how many of your computers have current vulnerabilities that are not managed. How many things in your firewall are open. There's a bunch of questions that you can only know if you do an in-depth study of your business that can help you make a really informed decision. He's been sitting on that thing for 6 months, I think is what I saw on the date. And he's not done any action on it, mainly because it didn't provide him any real information as to his current risk.
Actionable, data. And all that sounds a lot like what Telivy does, but we'll get to that in a bit. I did want to address, John, you mentioned FTC regulations. Not everybody might understand. It's really complex and might not understand what's going on yet. Naren, I know you've been doing a lot of research on the new FTC updates, regulations. Did you want to give us just a quick overview about what's going on?
Well, I mean, so basically FTC made an update to the safeguard rules, making it mandatory to make sure there's a certain protection of data and theft, or of any type of PII data, sensitive data in place for any financial institutions when they're harboring their customer information. So this basically includes vulnerability management. This includes encrypting the data that you have been collecting. This also includes any type of phishing simulation, awareness training, and all that, and everything that essentially these risk assessments kind of bring out, right, or the liabilities that they bring out. So it's a great step from the FTC, and there's actually since government regulation in place, which actually just enacted this month itself. It gives a lot of opportunities to start conversations with clients about these types of risks. I guess my question to you, John, is how do you thread the line between education and bringing up fear or scaring clients of risk, right? And like, how do you? And it's a fine line, but both kind of has its place, but kind of giving the education aspect of it and teaching them why this is important can create a longer lasting impact.
There's two ways we do it. I think one is simple facts through our webinars and simple facts when we're talking in public spaces about risk. And I think that you have to pair risk with action. And you have to pair fear with action. And so I will generally, I make jokes about it even in presentations. I did one for a local chamber a couple of weeks ago, and I went through all the facts of where we are with cybersecurity today. And I jokingly said, well, now that we're done with the doom and gloom, let's talk about why you don't have to be afraid of this stuff. And I think there's a pairing that has to happen when you talk about all these cyber attacks that are happening and that people are losing their business. It's not because it was mainly because they just didn't do anything. They just kind of left their head in the sand. And some of them were trying and they somebody might have, got through, I guess. But most of the cases you're looking, and I heard it on a podcast I listened to, that it's something like 80 or 90% of cyber attacks are due to misconfiguration.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're looking at is, let's just educate people on the steps that they need to. We want to make sure people know that there's real risk out there. But there's a way to, just like anything else in life, there's a way to solve and mitigate that risk by putting the right safeguards, the right things in place. So I generally try to pair it with, that's why we're here. We're here to educate you on the risk, but we also have a solution to help you mitigate it and solve it and keep your business safe. I almost think, and it's like you said, it's a really fine line, but sometimes I think that the industry has not talked about the risk enough. We've left talking about the risk to the mainstream media when a really big company gets hacked. So, when Whitman College here in Washington gets hacked, it shows up in the media. When any of the really big, we saw, I think it was Chinese government attacked some major federal government entities in the last couple of weeks, and that made the news. So in the regular SMB world, the small business world, the clients go, well, that's all big people. They're not going to mess with me. And so I think it's our job in the industry to help educate people, to just show them, like, there's a lot of big companies being hacked, but statistically, it's actually 50% of small business. And I think cold, hard facts are what you have to use. And there's always going to be a little bit of fear in there, because I think it's a scary thing that's happening. Like, there's no way around that. We can't not talk about it. And, but I try not to make that all we talk about. I think that's
I agree with your perspective there, John. And I just want to comment, right? Like, for the MSPs out there who are listening, from my perspective, and I'm not a psychologist, but like in psychology, fear is a valid human emotion that protects people, right? It gets humans to work. It gets us to work and solve a problem and keep us safe. MSPs communicating to, whether it's an IT admin or a founder of a small business, it's their job to keep their business safe. It's their job to protect their assets, their data, their privacy, their revenue. So I think, that I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Education plus, like tapping into, hey, like this is a real danger here.
Right.
And helping motivate people to act and get to work, right, and not do nothing, like you mentioned, right, John, with the other person. So,
well, and one of the coaches I use in my MSP business, he talks quite a bit about talking to your own clients. And I think we have a responsibility to, if you were doing or are doing MSP services the old way, if you're charging $60 a seat, maybe even $100 a seat, and you're calling that cybersecurity, you should relook at your stack. I think that's just where we're at today. And you should be looking to your clients and talking to them about their own risk, because at some point they will come to you when they get hacked, and guess who they're going to blame? Hey, you're doing my IT. You're supposed to know all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so we're, as MSPs, if we have clients we haven't had, and I've got a few that I'm still trying to get to, if we're not having those conversations with those clients, we're putting our own business at risk, because they're
Absolutely.
going to come our direction and they're going to ask us, why didn't you tell me this was a real thing?
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think that communication is very, very important. So we've been talking about risk. Earlier, you talked about risk assessments. So I understand that you also use Telivy to run risk assessments. I guess a first question: how did you meet Naren? How did you hear about Telivy? And follow-up question is, what do you use it for?
Yeah. So I'm proud to say that I'm part of that 7-figure MSP group, that if you're an IT guy and you've been on the main big Facebook group, you see Chris Weiser harassed a lot about posting things about our group. And I'll say it's honestly been one of the best decisions for our business to join that group. It's both financially, we've made our money back, but the reality is the education and the partnerships that we've gained, one with Telivy, has been priceless. So we got into working with you guys through their program, and we had to do our own risk assessments for a while, and it was time consuming. So being able to have people help us with that process has been awesome.
How much time are we talking? Are we talking like hours, days?
Well, you're always going to have the days when you're creating your final presentation, but I was putting in hours of configuring, and just to get, depending on the size of the company, multiple hours configuring deploying and getting all of everything out, where I just literally run a script and most of the work is automated.
Yeah, on
So
Telivy.
the difference in time is, like, I just deployed out this this morning. I deployed out 25 workstation risk assessment that's literally cooking and collecting data as we speak. Like right now, it's in the middle of collecting data. And it took me, I've been coordinating with their IT department. It took me like 5 or 10 minutes.
Wow.
And I did the work itself was just copy the script, and then I just babied it and watched it to make sure everything was working. That was it. And within a couple of days, we'll have some data, which is way different from before. You kind of had to make sense of the data yourself too. And so having some reports that get collected and put together is really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, one of my favorite things about Telivy is the dashboard, is the reports and the graphs. And here's how you compare with other companies like you, right? Here's how much revenue risk, right? Money you could possibly risk to lose, right? If that vulnerability from this report got exploited. And actually, Naren, is there anything for folks who may not be familiar with Telivy? Anything else you wanted to add?
No, I mean, I think John said it the best. Our essential goal has always been to save you time and kind of help you kind of focus on the important parts of the business as opposed to just the operational side of it. And that's what we've been able to automate and kind of get it off your plate, so you can actually just do the work of reading through the reports and being able to translate that to the client. And that's your relationship with the client is probably your most important kind of asset and value there, right? So and whatever we can do to help educate your client and yourself, where we're more than kind of happy to do that, with the reports and such and so.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I can appreciate. So John mentioned earlier, it helps with, running this risk assessment helps with educating the client. Why do you need cybersecurity services, right? This huge growth in the market and huge growth in the risks over these last several years. And also with the reporting and the data. So, and also, saving tons of time, right? Tons of your time, labor, costs, manual effort could, get you to scale up your operations. I'm curious, once you've done the risk assessment, you got the report, you're working with the client, you made that sale, what happens next? How does you and your team go in to solve the problems, target vulnerabilities, patch up, software, things like that?
So we use some tools specifically to help us look at those vulnerabilities. So like Cyber CNS is a good example of one that we're using. That's a channel. I think it's channel only too, but you can install it on each machine, or you can install it on the network if there's a domain controller, and it'll actually scan all the machines, and it will present you with an ongoing report of the vulnerabilities. And what's cool is, I think what a lot of MSPs maybe don't think about is there's patch management, and then there's how do you patch things like how many people, for example, don't update Zoom. They're on Zoom every day using it, but they're going right into their call, and when I ask them to update, they're like, I don't have time for that, and they just hit cancel. And what if there's a vulnerability in there? What if there's a supply chain attack with one of those products? So having something like Cyber CNS helps us to identify what that is initially, and then it also helps us look over the term, every month or every couple of weeks, or it automatically, in our case, runs and creates a ticket when a new vulnerability pops in. So, like, literally, we'll generate
join to the PSA tool.
Yeah.
So what's sort of the solution process after that? Do you send them an email and say, hey, update Zoom, right? Or
no, we're a full
remotely?
service, so we actually will log in and schedule a time and remote in and do the work for them and just get that updated, or
Got it.
push it out by script if we can. We pair that with also using Total and some other products to have multiple layers of security, but we're doing a regular scan of every machine in our stack, every machine in our customer database of vulnerabilities, and then we're scheduling either a automatic update to update it, or a time to go in there and patch them. Or if it's something really easy like Zoom, we'll tell them, hey, can you get into Zoom 5 minutes early next time an update?
Yeah.
I just
And that's all they need is just a reminder, right?
Yeah, it might be that. It might just be, hey, this program's out of date. I know because I used it that it's been telling you need to update and you've been ignoring it. So click that, get on your computer a couple minutes early and just click that button to update. So it really depends on the situation, but we aim to be full service. So we try to do as much as we can by script or automated. And then we either notify the client or log in depending on their schedule. Some people would rather just, you learn who those people are. They'd rather just go, yeah, I'll update that tonight. No problem.
Yeah.
Some people want the personal, hey, can you do this for me?
Have you ever experienced like a cybersecurity fire, either with something that happened with your clients, or maybe like a client that came to you right after something happened?
Yeah, I've had both. We had one in the middle of COVID that was a document. They're like a document company, so they scan documents for hospitals, and they had a attack. They had an actual ransomware attack, and it wiped out their hard drives. They had to redo some of their work. So we came in and had to, they had funny enough, they had a new server that they just hadn't deployed yet. So we literally redeployed the new server, got everything up and going. And then we were able to isolate off that other device from the network. And then we provided them with a zero trust network going forward to help them keep that from happening again. And then even since then, they've upgraded again to a new package where we're doing training and we're doing a bunch more for them. And then we had one of our clients that we had literally just taken over from a different MSP, one of the national franchises. And within a month after we took over, they were still on their exchange, like on their exchange server. We were in the process of moving them onto Office 365. It was literally within a week. We had moved them on the Office 365, and we started getting alerts on their Exchange server that somebody was trying to run scripts. And our MXDR team from Total actually caught it, stopped it from happening, and we were able to track it down and see that somebody was indeed trying to get into the server and run some scripts. It's one of those things too, like, we're looking at, okay, we need to have somebody get in there and mitigate and figure out what's going on and where this is all coming from. And then we've had a couple people who, even though we provide education, have clicked on phishing attacks, and we've had to jump in real quick and reset credentials and do some research to figure out what's going on and make sure that and they got through two-factor, which is becoming one of those things. I think we're going passwordless sooner than later, but they got through two-factor some because the customer clicked on the thing and let them in. So
this is the real deal.
Kind of stuff. It's real. What we see is with everything is as targeted towards email. You think an Exchange server, you think about Office 365, phishing attacks. There's a big Russian group right now that's doubling down on their efforts towards phishing attacks for Microsoft. Microsoft made an announcement yesterday about that. There's a lot going on, and it's all seems to be targeted by email. So most of what we see is phishing type attacks and things like that.
John, so how do you, I mean, there's one way of kind of, it seems like you're doing a very efforted job educating your clients on this, even before an attack happens. What are you doing to educate yourself, essentially, and being kind of abreast of all the new attacks and all the new information that's coming out from these major providers?
I'm working on my own education through some subscriptions I pay for. So like ITTV Pro is one that they've changed their name, but that's one of the ones that we just started subscribing to. And we've subscribed to it for our whole staff, or all of our technical staff all have a subscription. It was like, I don't remember what it was, like $1,000 or something a month, for everybody, or not a month, a year. And it's worth it because we're getting a lot of training out of that. Personally, I have a 20-minute to 30-minute drive each direction between my office and my house. And I listen to daily cybersecurity CISO podcasts. There's quite a few that I listen to that are maybe 6-minute headline one, but then there's a couple that are 30 minutes every day. I listen to what's the latest attack that's happening and who's announcing what. And I find that even though I'm talking to a lot of people who are in the industry, because of those podcasts, I'm finding out things sooner than others. I was talking to a vendor about a network company they're pitching, and they had a cyber attack just recently, and everybody's told to switch out all their boxes, and he's like, I didn't know that. So those podcasts, having a really good access to some podcasts and putting 30 minutes a day, 45 minutes a day into just listening to vulnerabilities that are out there is super helpful. Because I will come in the morning and I'll immediately, if there's something big that I know affects us, I'll immediately send a Teams message first thing in the morning to our guys. Hey, we need to look into this. But then things like Cyber CNS help identify when those do actually exist on the machines that are, in our environment. So a lot of the education is through our coaching team as well. So we learn a lot through that. But I probably get most of my day-to-day, what's happening in the world stuff from podcasts that are out there for IT professionals.
Yeah, I think the moral of the story for companies out there is call John. John is up to date, most educated, can prevent all of these cybersecurity risks and solving vulnerabilities. And if there is a fire, John can go fix them. So as we get to the end of the podcast here, I just want to leave with 20 years in the security business. Do you have any learnings you would like to share with MSPs in the audience? Any advice, based on your experience? And I just wanted a side note. I read that since you have been acquired and worked in this big, corporate IT department, you got a lot of experience, you learned a lot there, but you also ran your own business and served these small, medium, and large businesses yourselves. What were, your core learnings?
Yeah. So I'll say this. This applies to anybody in business, whether you're an MSP or not. But one of them is always reinvent yourself. One of the things that I'm trying to do is my wife and I are trying to take a intentional week a year where we sit down and look at our business and say, what do we need to reinvent in our business this year so that we are ahead of the people who are, competitors with us. We also collaborate with our local competitors too. I think there's nothing wrong. I've got a couple friends in the city that I go up in proposals against, and we always shake hands and say, if I don't get it, I hope you get it, that type of thing. So collaboration with even local people is helpful. If you're an MSP that is not cybersecurity focused, you need to look at it. I think that there's a potential that those who don't really take this threat and this seriously for their own current clients and future clients are going to end up being left behind. I think the days of commodity MSP that is tech support focused, I think that those days are numbered. And those who are focused in on security are going to rule the day, if you will, because we'll be able to at least limit the blast radius. I'll never claim that we can prevent or stop every cyber attack, but we can limit the blast radius, and we can make sure that insurance companies pay out because they've got best practices in place, and we can keep the attack to a minimum for our clients. That's really it. But yeah, I think jumping into the cybersecurity world and paying attention to what's happening, I think is huge. And we as an industry need to be ahead of cybersecurity and not behind. And I think that's the lesson for small MSPs. You want to jump in and really focus in on protecting your clients and giving them everything.
Thank you for that valuable lesson, John. And last question, who should reach out to you, and what's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, so best way to contact me you can go to our website, which is truit, truit.io. And you can also email me, john@truit.io as well. So probably the two best ways to get a hold of me, because our phone numbers are on the website. I mean, that's pretty simple, but yeah, john@truit.io is, I check it probably way more than I should. Weekends, holidays, all the time.
The hustle. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, John and Naren. And yeah, thank you for listening to another episode of the podcast. We'll see you all next time. Thank you all.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Jeremy.
Yes.